Hiya! Happy Sunday! Welcome back to another episode with me, Anya, here on Makeup and Metaphors, where we read books and we serve the best, the ultimate, the most amazing makeup looks, or pretty basic smoky eye with red lips, while we talk about some of the world's most famous poets and authors that maybe you knew nothing about their life and their background, especially for the GCSE children that I'm teaching. Sometimes context can get a bit boring, or maybe you don't want to research it, so why don't you listen to me while I put on a face of makeup? I think that sounds like a plan. I want to give a huge shout out to my year 10 pupils who I have been seeing this week. We've been back in teaching in my school and I've been loving seeing them all. They literally raise my spirits so much. Such a bright, lovely bunch of children, or adults really, and they're in year 10 now. So shout out to you. I'm sure it's really embarrassing that your teacher is on the internet, but I thought I might as well practice what I preach. I always tell children to go out, and learners and pupils, teenagers, adults, go out and do what you want to do. I always wanted to try and do a YouTube channel, so this is me doing that. So I'm practicing what I preach to try and show my students that you can do anything if you put your mind to it, really. I'm getting really close to 700 subscribers, so if you want to, help me along there, that'd be fab. Next week's video, I mightn't have my Invisalign in anymore. Maybe you haven't noticed that my teeth are like really shiny and have little notches on them, but I've been straightening my teeth for like a year now. It would have been done months ago, but obviously with lockdown I've been like trapped in these set of braces for months now. So they're gonna take them off on Tuesday and contour my teeth so that they're all nice and straight. If you look back at my introduction video, you can actually see that there's a big gap between my bottom two teeth there, and I've spent the last few weeks closing that gap and getting new sets in the post. I'm thinking about doing a video of my Invisalign journey. So my teeth were actually, they weren't very bad, but they just weren't great. So if you're interested in seeing that, pop a comment down below. I hope that you learned something from today's video. All right, thank you, and I'll see you in a second. Okie dokie, let's get stuck right into Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her poems and her life, her backstory. Some surprising things for sure that I did not know about her from just doing the kind of basic skimming research from just teaching the context of the poem Sonnet 43. If you have studied Sonnet 43, you might know a little bit of the context already, but hopefully you learned something new today and get a little bit of revision. So first things first, I'm going to tie up my hair with a glitter scrunchie because it's cute. I always need to get my hair out of my face when I'm doing my makeup, just so that I can focus. Right, let's get some primer. So Elizabeth was born on the 6th of March 1806 in County Durham, and she was the eldest of 12 kids, which is quite a number. Can't imagine having 11 siblings. Her family's history goes and reaches back to Jamaica and a slave trade in Jamaica and to Africa as well, and I think that she was of the belief that she had descendants from Africa because they would have had plantations there, and there may have been like relations between the slaves and the plantation owners. Her dad chose to raise the family in England but keep his business in Jamaica, like with the slaves, and they had a huge, like vast fortune because of this. There would have been a lot of money in something so horrendous. As well as that, her mum's side of the family also had a lot of money. I'm using a brand new foundation today. I've been using the NARS one since basically I started, but this is the Ordinary. It's only a few pounds, but it's really light. It literally is like water, and you can build it up just because it's so warm that I don't want to be wearing anything thick. But her mum's side also had a vast amount of wealth gained through slave labor. So we can see that like the money that they had in their family, I would say that it's blood money, or dirty money, slave money, just not a nice way to gain your fortune, is it? So her dad was Edward and her mum was Mary, and as I said, there was 12 children in the house. There's 8 boys and 4 girls, although one of the girls perished when she was 3, so I suppose 8 boys and 2 girls really. Elizabeth's nickname growing up was Ba. I don't know why that is, but it's literally B-A, Ba, like a sheep. And they moved into like a huge mansion that was decorated in this Turkish style when she was a young child. So she had like a really upper class childhood. And this house was described as like something from like Arabian Nights. It had like mother of pearl and the doors, and everything was actual gold. Like lavish wasn't even the word for it. and I suppose that was like a physical representation of the wealth that they earned from the slave trade and slave labour. Just like a lot of the people that we've covered so far, a lot of the authors from like the Victorian era and the Elizabethan era and all the different ones that we've covered, Elizabeth had a tutor. She was extremely studious, really enjoyed being challenged and working hard at home. I've got a new concealer today as well. I'm really upping my game. She was even studying like Greek by the time she was 10, and she was really encouraged by her parents. So we can see that she obviously had a great childhood, got to do everything she wanted, got to be very clever, great education, great relationship with her parents. But soon after, she started to battle an unknown illness along with her sisters. And obviously medicine back then is not what it is today, and it was just an unknown illness. Like nowadays you get sick, you go, you get tested, you figure out what it is and then they target it. Back then they did not have that luxury. And out of her sisters, she was the only one that the illness stuck to. So all the other sisters basically got better, but Elizabeth had it for the rest of her life, and she would suffer from like head pain, like migraines, pain in her spine, and also loss in mobility. So literally she would become paralyzed from this unknown illness that was attacking her and stuck with her. Some sources link it to a riding accident where she was trying to dismount a horse and fell, and obviously maybe she like had a spine injury, and that would explain obviously the pain in her spine, like her head pain, and oh, we don't want contour there, and like the loss of mobility. But that wouldn't explain why the other sisters got sick too and then got better. I suppose maybe it could have just been total coincidence that the sisters came down with something else around the time that she had this horrible side effects of her riding accident, but we don't know. She took opiates for the pain. So if you're like aware of opium is, you know, what's in heroin. So when you take opiate painkillers, they're just as highly addictive as drugs such as heroin. And she also took morphine, you know, extremely strong painkiller, also highly addictive. And she became extremely dependent on all of these substances because of her chronic pain. And anybody who has chronic pain will understand what she was going through. But it's said that this could all have contributed to her super vivid imagination. Like if she was on opiates and morphine and all sorts of drugs, like usually when you're on things like that, you end up getting like fever dreams, maybe even hallucinations. So that could all just be part of it. She could have literally had some of her most amazing vivid ideas from the pain meds that she was on. One little fact that I found out about her that links her to Mary Shelley, so who we were talking about 2 weeks ago, was that she was a huge fan of Mary Shelley's mum. So if you remember, we talked about Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. So she was a huge fan of her and like her book on women's rights, which is called A Vindication for the Rights of Women. So yeah, you could say she was quite the feminist, I suppose. She also, very similar to Emily Dickinson that we were talking about last week, she really hated the idea of women's roles being in the house and having all of the jobs, the like, uber feminine jobs of cleaning and housework and childbearing, all that sort of stuff. The family were intensely religious, and Elizabeth would like reflect quite a lot, quite often. Obviously, if your family is very religious, that's going to have quite a profound effect on you. And if you read her poem in Sonnet 43, you can see that perhaps she lost that faith for some of her life. Like there is a specific line which says like, with my lost saints, you know, but then I love you even more after death. I'll pop the poem up here for a few seconds so that you can have a read of it while I warm up my face. So a lot of negative things happened in a short period of time next for Elizabeth, and I'm just going to contour. I bronzed first and then contoured, so I don't know how that's going to work. I think they're just kind of two different tones, aren't they? Bronzing is like warm tone, contour is cool tone to develop shadow, so we'll see. But yeah, like quite a lot of negative things happened for Elizabeth then in a short period of time. Her mum died, her grandmother passed away, and then the abolition of slavery. Now, obviously, that's amazing, the abolition of slavery, but for a family that works in the slave trade and predominantly, well, probably got all of their fortune on both sides, both the mum's and the dad's side, was all from slavery. they were plunged into poverty, which they were never aware of before, and they had to sell their huge Turkish-style mansion. And they moved to 50 Wimpole Street. And at 50 Wimpole Street, her health began to improve, finally. And she isolated herself quite a lot though. I think her bedroom was like upstairs, maybe in like the attic. And she really isolated herself, again, similar to Emily Dickinson. There's a lot of kind of parallels between the two ladies. And she really only wanted to be around her family. Maybe she didn't want to push the fact that her health was kind of so fragile. But in 1837, she developed what seemed to be like ulcerations in her lungs, or I think they were called tuberculosis ulceration of her lungs. And her doctor insisted that she moved to, I think it's called Torquay in Devonshire. I think probably for the sea air and like clear, fresh countryside in comparison to city life. But this move ultimately would be tragic for her and her family, as her brother Edward died in a sailing accident there in Torquay, and her other brother Samuel died of a fever in Jamaica, and both of these had a profound impact on her health. I use the word profound a lot. I'll say a dramatic or an intense impact on her health. And she blamed herself for Edward drowning in Torquay because obviously the doctors had told her that she had to move there, and she had, along with the family. So she blamed herself because if they hadn't moved to Torquay, that place, maybe her brother would still be alive, he wouldn't have drowned, and her health just started to fade once more. So in my eyes, she kind of went on to show that I don't think she was made of the same material of her ancestors, you know, the ones in the slave trade, because she seemed to go on to fight for people's rights. Although, you know, I can't comment, I don't know what her views were on the slave trade personally, but she went on to fight and condemn child labour laws and even helped the reform of them in the 1840s. So it's nice to see somebody in her family doing something for good. And her writings inspired a man named Robert Browning to write to her, to contact her. And obviously, I'm sure you can guess, they ended up dating and marrying, seeing as her name is Elizabeth Barrett Browning. But her dad was not happy with this man at all, so that they wedded in secret, and then they kind of fled, I suppose. She knew that her dad would completely disapprove of their marriage, and they went to Italy. Right, what look can I do today? I've got a brand new palette that arrived a few days ago. I've swatched it, but I haven't used it properly. The names on these colours are so macabre. This one I'm using right now is called Life Insurance. It's so warm in the UK right now. What is happening? I thought when I moved here it would be similar to Irish weather, but it's not, it's warmer. This one is called Solemnly Swear. Actually no, I'm going to use The Morgue. Never have I seen so many shades of grey, apart from in the cover of a book. Ooh, pretty. Very little fallout, there's a tiny bit though. Do the other eye and then we'll talk about the rest of her life. Right, I'm back. I've got some eyeliner on, I've got some lashes on. These lashes are fab. They're super like natural. They're by a brand called Eldora. They're like in a yellow box. I first tried them when I went to Drag World last year, when they had a stall and they were selling like wholesale prices, and they're just the best. They've got amazing glue and everything. Not sponsored obviously, because I'm a teeny tiny YouTuber. Just to get back to the story, I've kind of been a bit obsessed with makeup in the last few minutes, but Elizabeth Barrett Browning was completely right when she thought that her dad would be unhappy. But one thing she didn't bargain on was that her brothers would also be extremely unhappy. And not only did her dad disinherit her, but her brothers disinherited her too. And that left her feeling atrocious. Like, the one person she loved in the world and married, her family just had absolutely no interest in him, and they just disapproved of him. Right, let's get some highlight on the high points now, because we're nearly finished. So Elizabeth really wanted some children, and she did end up having a son, but unfortunately it took 4 miscarriages for this to happen. And I suppose while that might seem quite shocking, we do need to remember that medicine was not what it is nowadays. Back then they didn't have scans and all the sort of ultrasounds that we have now, so miscarriages were quite common. Obviously completely heartbreaking though at any time. And at 43 she had her son Robert, and his nickname was Pen. So both their nicknames have been quite weird. Her nickname was Ba and his nickname was Pen. So there you go. I'm sure there was a reason for them being that. So Elizabeth died on the 21st of June 1861, and her husband Robert said that she died smiling and happily with the face like a little girl, so happy. And her last words are said to have been beautiful, just the word beautiful. And she's buried in a Protestant English cemetery in Florence. So if you're ever in Florence, maybe you could give her grave a little visit or check it out. And modern scientists have like discussed what her cause of death may have been, and obviously the fact that she had like a lifelong illness as well that more than likely contributed to her death. And it's said that she may have died from, I'll put the words up on the, again I was about to say up on the board, up on the screen, and I think it was hypokalemic periodic paralysis. So you know when it said that like she would literally lose mobility for periods of time. So there we go, that could have been the name for what it was that she suffered from. So there's like a little bit more of an in-depth look into Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her life and her family's history in the slave trade, which I had no idea about, and a little bit less of a focus on her husband, because I find that when you research her for the context, you usually find a lot more on her partner Robert Barrett Browning than on her and her family, so I thought I'd stick with that today. I hope that you learned something. This is my first time doing a red lip. I'm shook. And I am shooketh. I hope you learned something today. And when you see me next time, hopefully my Invisalign braces will be off and I'll have nice straight teeth. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, all that sort of stuff that makes me feel good, and like this isn't a complete waste of my Saturdays. But anyway, keep safe, keep indoors, keep sanitizing, all of them sort of things to make sure that you're not going to be sick. And thank you very much. Bye.